Okay, let's turn our attention to the situation at Manchester City, and Sam Lee of The Athletic joins us this morning. Sam, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning. Yeah, not bad, thanks. Been a busy weekend.
I can only imagine late Friday night is the perfect time to release these type of stories because it gives everybody plenty of time to think about it all weekend and talk about it on Sunday. What do you expect to happen next, and what are the routes available to Manchester City to appeal this properly?
Okay, yeah. So what I expect to happen, and I think this is pretty obvious from City's statement on Friday night, is they're going to appeal it. They could go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I think they're most likely going to say, or go down the route of abuse of process and say that UEFA's process was flawed and maybe prejudiced. They've already tried that. They went to CAS before there was even a decision to appeal against, which got thrown out ultimately because CAS said, well, there's no appeal, so what are you doing coming to us? But some of the things they said about the leaks through the process, CAS said, okay, you may have a point in there. So that might be something that you go back to. I think they're also ready to say, well, look at these guys and look at these guys and look at these guys. But the only thing with that is that's not really absolving themselves. It's kind of dragging everyone else down with them. So they might be able to get PSG or Juventus or Bayern Munich in the dock as well, but I can't see them overturning it. So basically, they need to prove their own innocence, and they will go to CAS to do that. If CAS side with UEFA, they may even go to the Swiss courts beyond that, and that then could be something that goes on for years, and they may even have to serve that Champions League ban while trying to fight and clear their name in European courts for years to come.
Okay, that's interesting because no one was quite exactly sure how that whole process would work. So just to recap, there's the technical grounds in which they might try and get this thrown out, and then there's the everybody else was doing it, neither of which is like we're not guilty here. It's more we're getting off on a legal technicality.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I mean, in fairness, in the City statement and all the statements they put out, they've always said there's no evidence for their wrongdoing and that they'd be able to prove that. So I'm looking forward to see. I'm sure everyone is. Is that true? Do they think they will get this overturned? Because they're supremely confident they will. But do they think they'll get it overturned because they can prove that UEFA's process was a little bit dodgy, or because they actually haven't done anything? And the emails that are in Der Spiegel and other publications from football leagues, they always say they were taken out of context. We haven't actually seen the context. So if Man City were to say, these are all the emails, here's the context, we might be able to go, oh yeah, there is a campaign against the club, but we haven't seen that yet. So yeah, what they need to actually do is prove that they haven't done anything wrong. If it gets overturned because the process was dodgy, that will be a fair a judgment from CAS, I think. But, in the court of public opinion, nobody's going to say, oh yeah, City were hard done by. They're going to say, well, they still did wrong. They've just been able to prove that UEFA did wrong as well. It's a bit of a complicated one, really.
It would be quite
very complicated, obviously.
It would be quite the power play from UEFA that if their process was dodgy, to still go ahead and actually ban Manchester City from UEFA competition for 2 seasons. You would imagine that they are fairly watertight in their process if they're going to make this decision, because it is a landmark decision, Sam. I don't think many people actually expected them to have the courage to go ahead and do this.
No, they didn't. There was a lot of shock around it, and I think even people who wanted it to happen and have been following it closely, I think they were sceptical whether UEFA were going to act quite so much. I didn't expect anything near as severe. There are a few theories floating around that it might just be a way for UEFA to look strong and say, look, this is what we actually wanted. This is what we handed them with. But then for UEFA to kind of not exactly have the best process for it, and it eventually gets overturned by CAS, and UEFA can say, well, we did everything we wanted. We did everything we said we would, but ultimately City fought it, and they've used their financial might instead of our justice or whatever. So it might be a way for everyone to kind of win. City may get off with it, but UEFA could still look strong. It's part of it. It could be that element, really.
What has Pep Guardiola's reaction been? I think there was a meeting between himself and the players on Saturday.
Yeah, well, there was always going to be a meeting because they were on their winter break and they were going to have a training session on Saturday. So they always would have had a meeting about these are the games you've got coming up, and if you're not feeling ready, go and have a massage or whatever. But obviously now, given what happened on Friday night, it took on a bit of greater significance, and it was peak Guardiola really by all accounts. He told them, it's tempting to say siege mentality, but it was kind of, if they don't believe in us, we'll show them, and we need to go and show people that we haven't just won what we've won because of money. We've done it because we're good. We're good players, good managers, and the rest of it was quite literally focus on the next game. The next game in this case seems to be, they're thinking ahead to Real Madrid, but they're using the rearranged West Ham game and the Leicester game as the build-up to the first leg of the Champions League game against Real Madrid. And the idea is, be as focused as you ever have been. Don't go to any parties. Don't do any events. Eat well. Look after yourself. Sleep well. Make sure you're focused and ready on the Real Madrid game. So that's what Guardiola's response has been.
Sam, the comments from Stephen Gerrard over the weekend were, I thought, wild, to be honest, where he was saying he's very, very interested for obvious reasons, planting the notion that somehow the Premier League are going to step in and strip Manchester City of titles that have been won. There's no possibility of that, surely, is there?
Well, I mean, all I can say really on the Premier League front is there is a possibility of points deductions, but we don't know if they would be historic or whether they would just say, oh, well, we found you guilty now, so here's the points deduction now. The Premier League have always been pretty tight-lipped on this. It's an interesting one because it always seemed like the Premier League were just kind of following UEFA's lead a little bit in the sense of, okay, well, there's an investigation, so we probably had better investigate as well. Their burden for losses, for UEFA financial fair play, it's 30 million euros over 3 years. I think the Premier League allow for losses of 100 million euros in the season, 100 million pounds even. But it's just whether they decide that they've been misled or whether they've, cooked the books effectively, inflated these sponsorships. If they do, and maybe the Premier League now feel, okay, well, UEFA have got really strong, we need to go really strong as well, then there could well be a points deduction. But I'm sure you can imagine the legal minefield that they themselves have to go through if they went where it applies to this. But I suppose it's possible. I couldn't tell you for sure because this is what the Premier League would have to decide. But I suppose it's possible that if they decided that City have broken the rules between 2012 and 2016, maybe they would look at those seasons and take points from all of those seasons. And then obviously in 2014, when they won the title just about, if they were to take 5 points off, that would be enough for Liverpool. But can you imagine? Can you imagine, the legal difficulties that would bring? City are going to take UEFA all the way. If the Premier League started taking titles off them, it would go on forever.
Is there any prospect of all of these legal difficulties and the backlash against the ownership of Manchester City? Is there any prospect of the ownership deciding that this is no longer worth the hassle, that the point of owning Manchester City was supposed to be to show an entire nation state in its best possible light, and now the ownership group have been found by UEFA not to have been running things properly, that there's a contagion towards their reputation that might ultimately lead to them deciding to step away from football?
Well, yeah, a colleague was saying over the weekend, this will play badly in the region around Abu Dhabi, because the first time with the Champions League stuff, they could say, well, it's definitions of earnings, and they moved the goalpost a bit, and we were compliant, and suddenly they changed this. And it's all just that kind of stuff. But now, this ban relates to deliberately misleading people, deceit, and all this kind of stuff, and that will apparently not look so good. And as you say, if the goal of the ownership was to bask in the glory of a Premier League team and say, well, look, we're part of this wonderful football club that wins trophies and has got the best manager in the world and some of the best players. They're not able to bask in that glory so much right now, are they? At the moment, I don't think there's any. Well, it's very difficult to have a source inside the Abu Dhabi, tourism arm, but at the moment, it doesn't seem like there's any sense that they're ready to pull out. It does seem that they're ready to fight it all the way. By all accounts, the Sheikh himself is very annoyed at it. They place a lot of the blame on PSG's shoulders. Obviously, you've got regional politics there with Qatar and Abu Dhabi. I think they're in the mood for a battle, really. If it gets to the end and if they exhaust 10 years in the courts and they're still no better off, perhaps they'll pull out.
Players-wise, then, I guess the same question could be asked if they feel their own reputation is going to be hampered by this over the next couple of weeks, months or years. But then also there is the knock-on effect of if this ban is implemented, even if it is for one season, Sam, because first of all, they're not going to have the revenues from Champions League. But second of all, they're going to have to be doubly careful this time around to not funnel money from elsewhere into transfer policy. It will have to come from very proper procedure. So there might be an air of over-caution on the part of Manchester City, which would lead to all these signings that Pep Guardiola is looking to make. That'll make them redundant. They won't happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, for argument's sake, City were pulled up on this because of the leaks from football leagues. The emails. And if they're confident they're not going to get the email, and if what UEFA is saying is true, then City have basically emailed around themselves and said, well, we can get sponsorship from wherever we want, it doesn't matter. If they feel they're not going to get caught again, if they feel their emails aren't going to get hacked, if what UEFA's saying is true, and it may well be, they may well be able to prove that. City may well feel, well, we'll just get the sponsorship back from someone else again, and it doesn't matter because they may just feel, well, they're not going to catch us this time, and if they do, well, we're just going to prove it again. So, there is that element of it. If what they say about City is true, then what's to say they will clean up their act now? But yeah, on the other hand, from City, you mentioned the players. I think, I've heard of a couple of players, and I think there was a story overnight that Raheem Sterling is definitely going to be staying. That's come from his agent on the record, which is very rare in football media circles, certainly. A couple of others, maybe. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if some thought, not sure about this, need to be playing the Champions League, need to be in line to win Ballon d'Ors or whatever, need to be at the top level ahead of the next World Cup, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, as you say, it goes back to the revenues. City made a £10 million profit last year, which is all right as far as the football club's concerned. But you take out the 77 million they made from the Champions League, not including gate receipts. I think with gate receipts, it's probably closer to 90 or 100 million pounds. If that's the simple maths, then all of a sudden you're making a massive loss. And then if you're making a massive loss, you're going to fail financial fair play for next time you want to get into the Champions League. So you're right. It might not come down to the players wanting to go. It might come down to the fact that City go, we need to sell Leroy Sané and not replace him. Or maybe we need to sell somebody else and not replace him because we need to balance the books this way. So it might not be down to the players wanting out. It might be down to City saying we need to balance the books. But of course, this all hinges on all these appeals that we're going to see in the next couple of months.
Yeah, if only they had a world-renowned academy that they could stock the team with, eh? Sam, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks, man.
That's Sam Lee there from The Athletic, who's been covering this story in great detail and great depth. You should check that out if you can. Now, global endurance athlete and Donegal man Jason Black is going to join us in studio next this morning here on OTB AM. He's a man with a remarkable story. He's aiming to become the first person to ever complete the world's Big Three, the world's toughest human-powered challenge. The rules are simple. Solo race across America, solo row the Atlantic Ocean, and solo summit Mount Everest. Have a look.